Welcome, I'm Giulia.
And I am Marta.
And this is LateMode, a podcast in search of the zeitgeist. Through a series of conversations, we explore the fragmented and hyper-connected modes of our current times. In this episode, I met up with Marius Houschyar to discuss the many dimensions of humility. Marius is an artist, producer, filmmaker, and graphic designer. He explores the role of identity and truth through these various mediums. While Marius grew up in Germany, he has been gradually moving eastwards to Prague, Bucharest, and Istanbul, where he currently lives. As an artist, he's constantly pushing the boundaries of his work to uncover new forms of expression and understanding. During our conversation, I asked Marius to share his thoughts on this drive to explore, which for him is also very present in the physical dimension as he sets out on adventurous journeys to discover and inspire himself. As always, I really want to thank you for taking some time from your day to listen to the LateMode podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Hi Marius, thank you for taking time and meeting me online today. So I just informed you a few minutes ago of the topic that we're discussing today, and I was checking on you on how it's sitting, this topic of humility, which Toby has left for us. So I'm curious to see what will come out of it. I think it would be really nice to start by introducing who you are and what are you up to, and then, we can maybe get into it.
Yeah, I'm Marius Houschyar. I'm an artist, I would say. There is also already coming the point of humility, maybe always a problem to say, like, am I an artist? Am I on the way to become an artist? Or am I an artist already? But I think as much as I'm producing and what I'm dealing with every day and what I'm thinking about every day it's all about art, and I'm having a quite wide definition of artist, more like a boy's definition. So I think everybody can be an artist, so I can be an artist too.
I like this definition. If everybody can be, then you can too, of course.
Actually, everybody is to some extent. People are just not aware of it, maybe.
I agree. Creativity is something inherent that we have within ourselves. We just need to find ways to express it. But maybe we should tell listeners also a little bit about your music background, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, since my childhood, I was always extremely triggered by music. At my home in the village in Germany where I grew up, my mom would always play loud music. Her favorite musician is Prince. By far her favorite musician. So I grew up with Prince. Once I asked her about what was the first song I heard in my life, and she said it was Aretha Franklin. So I had a quite good input, I would say, and I started with hip hop back in the days when I was younger. I mean, I grew up also with MTV, obviously in the early 2000s, which was great, like R&B. Scene at this point. I think the pop music was at a really, really great level, especially from the USA. And then when I moved away from the village, I was already really into music, and I came to Dresden and I met the electronic music scene there for the first time, and the techno scene. I got into it and I started to buy vinyls and play techno. At these times we were playing really old school Detroit 90s stuff. And we started to make music events with a friend, with Geronimo together, create music events, invite artists, start digging more, buying more vinyls, changing our styles a lot. While I must say, actually, people sometimes they think their music taste is changing. For me, it's just getting broader. I still understand the music that I used to listen like 10 years ago. Now my repertoire is just bigger.
And now you're basically traveling around Europe and also outside of Europe to play mostly electronic music or also live concerts, etc.
Yeah, well, I must say, since I grew up in the dance music, electronic dance music scene, I was really into this for a long time and was part of this in Germany. But moving away from Germany in 2016, I guess it was, brought me more to myself. I kept on moving away from the scene to different countries like Romania then and Istanbul in the end, where completely new scenes were found and new things were learned. But I really, especially the space that I created here in Istanbul for me, my own flat, gave me the possibility to explore my own feelings about music, and my music has changed dramatically since then.
So, two things actually I want to get into right away. You were already talking about this, how essentially already the definition of being an artist has something to do with humility. Are you allowed to use this definition or not? When do you become an artist, etc.? And I think also it has something to do with what you were just saying, this comparison to others. So the moment that you start comparing yourself to others, you may or may not become an artist. And I remember when we were together in Mashish, we were precisely talking about this idea of an objective production of something that is objectively good. And when does it become good? As an artist, do you make that statement or is it up to others? I really want to get into this because I think it's a very interesting point when nowadays we're constantly trying to measure our work, even though I know making music, you told me, is something that it comes from your heart, right? It's just something that you do anyway, every day. But then there is this moment in which you put it out into the world and then it becomes something else? Or do you still feel that it's still the same thing?
Yeah, well, when I'm creating music, I'm in a certain place in my life, in a certain place on this earth, and I have certain feelings that I express in this moment. And obviously, people who listen to it on the other side of the world at another time may not have the same feelings like I had. Obviously, music though is also about sharing feelings, but I think it depends. Like, of course, there is more concrete music, maybe, and more abstract music. Like, let's say if there is like a love song, which is very straight written and has very clear lyrics, it may transfer the same feeling that the musician intended to also to the audience. But I mean, music in general, as it's so abstract, gives a lot of room for interpretation. Some music more than others. And this is the beautiful thing about it, I think, that I personally, I listen to a lot of music from other people, from other artists, and I'm triggered by it, and I have some certain feelings when I listen to it, and I'm sure it is different than what the musician felt. Sometimes I feel connected to the musician in a way, but I think this is the nice thing that everybody has a completely subjective experience while listening to the music, and it's like maybe like if you read a book, the writer had some certain pictures in his mind when he's describing this bar or something like this that he's talking about, and you while reading it would fill this with pictures from your own experiences. You know what I mean?
Yes, but what would you say is your hope when you create a piece? I remember we were talking a little bit about, well, you essentially told me, I want to take myself seriously in making music at this point in my life. So it's something that you want to, put your effort into, work on it, also hard sometimes. And what do you hope when you make something and you release it? How do you hope it is received? Are you hoping to transfer these same emotions? Are you hoping that people would receive it and just like it? Or do you actually want to carry something with this piece of music that specifically you want them to receive?
Yeah, well, I think it's like something, it's like a feeling that maybe everybody of us has. It's about hoping to be understood. And this doesn't only mean I should be understood exactly in the way that I did this, because mostly I don't have like a really direct intention. This is something that really comes out of me in a very natural way. This is just like seeing me on the street, maybe for a moment or something like this. But I'm having a certain feeling, and obviously I also have an idea the more I work on a piece, and I hope that it's getting obviously well received and that people understood what I tried to do without being 100% sure what I actually tried to do. I think what I tried to do is I hope that people feel something when they meet my music, that it gives them a new feeling maybe, and maybe a new perspective about some things, because this is what I think is art, that it creating something that also gives others the possibility to think out of the box or see things in a different way, even if it's just a different personal standpoint.
Yeah, I find this point interesting because going back to our topic of today, so humility, I think that some definitions, let's say if we want to really take it by the letter, what does this word mean? Part of it in my mind, it is that you can be freed from pride. So you become humble when you're not run by pride when you make something or when you do something, or even pride about yourself. And I think this is a really, I don't know, there is such a fine line when you make art in general between, being super proud of what you made and also receiving all this extra pressure on the other hand, because you really want it to be received well. And then there is the other side of it where you could just make something really just for yourself, and then you're freed from this pride price, so you're free to put it out, and whatever happens to it, you're not bothered by it. And I remember that you and I were, really trying to talk about it when we were together in Mashish. And I'm curious to, how do you see it? How do you experience it in the world of music, for example, that you're part of?
Well, I think humility firstly feels like a really high value, something that you would like to achieve, someone you would like to become, somebody who is humble as much as possible, and doesn't ask for much but is able to give a lot maybe. But I think this is a really romanticized thing in the end, because being humble, it depends on the definition, but not taking anything and not wanting to take anything, and also not having any pride in oneself, is not necessarily right, I think. I mean, either you find a peace in yourself and you create you create your things, and you are absolutely humble about it, but still happy. This would be like more like a kind of maybe a Buddhist Zen approach, but this is really hard to practice, I think. So
Why do you think it's hard to practice it?
because as long as you're not completely developed by yourself and in 100% peace with everything in the world and yourself, you are searching for something. And definitely appreciation from outside is a part of this. And also seeing your own value is a part of this. Actually, the whole point of searching for yourself is maybe to find your own value. Obviously, you shouldn't see yourself in a narcissistic way, in a hybris, but you should definitely be aware of your own value. And I think rather than being humble and feeling small and not able to say something loud, it is important to find the balance between it. And also, instead of always being unsatisfied by your work, also, you should be able to also sometimes see where you are and what you have achieved already, in order to gain energy and power and happiness through the products that you did, and that will lead you to being able to make more products and grow.
So would you say that in the way that you experience the making of music right now, which I know it's mostly in the studio, right? And this other side of life where you go hitchhiking from Istanbul to Tehran, traveling and doing other things on the move, would you say that this has got something to do with this balance you're talking about?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I must say these are a little bit two different types of traveling. Like, sometimes I do these adventurous. I mean, all the travels are adventurous in a way, but sometimes they're not music related. So, like the last trip I made with Eylül to Iran, this was not music related, although we thought about music and sound a lot because this was part of our research.
Sorry, you made a trip with who?
Yeah, Eylül Deniz is the person that I love the most probably on this earth, and she's a musician as well. Studied music and produces music, sings and plays, and is super aware of music and thinks a lot about it. This is also the biggest center of her life, I would say. So we did together this trip and made a research about noise and silence. Yeah, and I must say, of course, for making something, for me, it's always about inspiration. If I don't have anything, then from nothing, I cannot really do anything. So I need to get out into the world. I need to have conversations with people. I need to have feelings. I need to see and experience different things. And I must say, the more different they are from the things that I'm used to, the more inspiration they give me, even if they are not positive. So throwing myself out in the world with Eylül and hitchhiking through Kurdistan during Ramazan is something that I haven't done so far. So this was obviously something that gave me a big amount of inspiration, and her too. And then there are the trips that I now recently started to travel and play concerts again, especially after the pandemic. I haven't done this since super long, and also before I haven't done really many tours or something. And also the last tour that I did now was about reconnecting to old friends, and this was often music related. And I had the chance to see amazing concerts and see many like-minded people from the music scene and have conversations with them and listen together and experience together. And this also gave me a big amount of inspiration, obviously, to listen to other concerts. I see it in a different way now. I'm not comparing myself in this childish way, trying to be somebody that I am not, but I try to see what others people do, let myself get inspired, and adapt certain things into my work as well, of course.
So do you think this is something maybe that comes with becoming a bit older and having more experience, then you free yourself a little bit from this comparison to others?
Yeah, I must say, I have lots of friends who are quite older than me, like around 10 years, and they always told me, hey, Marius, you will see everything will get easier. And I must say, I really experience it like this. I'm only 20, I'm going to be 28 in 2 months, and I'm still quite young, obviously, but I see an immense difference between me with 22 and now. I'm generally more relaxed about things in general, which gives me the possibility to not get lost in certain emotions or dramas or feelings or things I need to achieve. I think I'm on a good way to find more to who I am, what I am standing for, and of course this goes along with with not needing that much appreciation from outside anymore. But of course, this is something you couldn't also live without, I think.
Yeah. And going back to what you were telling us before, you made actually a very beautiful documentary during this hitchhiking travel that you made, which I have seen. I don't know if it's possible to see it anywhere at the moment.
No.
No. Maybe just talk a little bit about why silence and noise actually, where was this inspiration coming from?
Yeah, the story is actually that it's coming from many different points. The relationship I have with Eylül showed us, or sometimes brought us to desperate points of being not able to understand each other because of the way that we are thinking. I've never had this with somebody before. We are completely different in the way that we perceive the world. And then there came always a question about what is right and what is wrong. Is there a general right? Is there a general wrong? And I came to the point, I think we came to the point that there's not such a thing, and it's more like a pluralistic philosophy of a world which contains many different worlds, and every world is individual in a way. Then it comes to the point that noise and silence actually stand for two things, two opposites that are linked to each other. I think that comes from our human brain, that we have like two parts of our brain, and this is why we receive everything. If we break down the entire universe to one sentence, we could say there are always two things and everything in between. There's life and death, there is night and day, there is North Pole and South Pole, East and West, man and woman, sun and moon.
But how do you see oppositions? Do you see them coming from each other? So, for instance, you cannot have death without life, and you cannot have life without death.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the joke about it, because it looks like opposites, but they also don't exist without the other one. So they are in a really strong relation. Nothing can be without both. Both have to be. It's like the yin and yang symbol is probably the best symbol showing this. So it's a whole that only can be a whole with both sides, and each side also contains a part of the other one inside. So they are not that different in the end. Actually, they are exactly balanced. With noise and silence, it's exactly this. And on our trip, we tried to define this for a long time. What is noise and what is silence? On a political way, on a personal way, on a visual way, on a auditive way, but we couldn't find any straight answer to this. And always when I brought an argument, it would be directly countered by her with an also very logical argument. And we found out that both is exactly the same, but still they are like the opposites of each other. And this is how this whole thing developed, that, this contradiction that has to become a concession.
What did you learn from it? Or did you learn anything?
Well, I learned a lot. It's something that became actually a maxime in my life and that I always get thrown back to. And I think it's important to not judge and define the things so straight. There's always a different point of view, and there is always a point of view which would be exactly the opposite, and both of the views would be always right. So it's always depending on your own feeling on the situation. And of course, one has to be straight in a way, and one has to make decisions. Sometimes you cannot always say like, everything is everything. What should I do? I think this is about intuition and a very personal feeling. There's also maybe it's about your own experiences and to follow your heart in a way. But in the end, actually, whatever decision you take, every decision you take will bring you further. And sometimes you have the feeling it doesn't even matter, even though the biggest decisions, each decision will bring you to another way, and you will never know which one is the right one, because both ones are right.
But then again, it really connects to this being humble that we're talking about, because in my opinion, at least, in staying humble, you also stay very open to listen to others' opinions. You don't get stuck into one or try to impose your opinion. Because in the end, as you're saying, there aren't always, you can always find a counter argument to an opposite opinion, right? You can always, somebody could argue exactly the opposite, and if it makes sense for them, then it makes sense. You can't argue that it doesn't. And I think this leads, of course, to a lot of political problems, a lot of religious conflicts, a lot of like even day-to-day personal relationship problems. And I didn't even think about it, but your work in this case, in this documentary, actually fits to me quite well to the topic of today.
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge, this film should remind us of acknowledging each other and still finding an own way. Because the film also doesn't come up with a solution. And in the end, these two parts, which were trying to find themselves and trying to interact and finding so many contradictions and also concessions, are still not together. They are still going their own ways because they couldn't find a way. Obviously, we should all find a way, and we should always long and aim for finding a way to live peacefully together. This is why, despite all of this confusion, that all the positions can be oppositioned and can be seen from a different point of view and can also be right, it is important also to have some values, obviously, that you follow and that you show to the world, that you stand for. Nobody wants to be a completely indecisive person. And also it is hard to interact with anybody if you can never stand for anything. It's important to see both sides, I think. You have to have your own standpoint to operate in this life and to stand for something.
Do you think you found your values?
Not completely, but I'm really trying to feel them. I think there are values, but obviously also you're always also overwhelmed and very influenced by seeing that others have completely different opinions, and then you question your own values, and then you get in this contradictive part.
You were saying that before, that even at the beginning of the documentary, you were trying to define what is good and what is bad. Just only by starting by that, you already realized that it's not that easy to even name a value and understanding what that value actually means.
Yeah, I think it's really important to stay very liberal about life and about these things. To stay very free and always acknowledge that there is another point. I mean, obviously, if it becomes oppression and murder, there shouldn't be an understanding for that. But still, there's also the sentence that you should always understand your enemy or something like this. So you will also not be able to solve problems without understanding why people are acting like this. But it shouldn't be in a way to understand them, to confess to them, and to be like, to understand and do the same in the end. No, obviously there is some values that you should follow, and that there are also some things you should oppose. But it is important to be not stuck in a certain point that you are not flexible in. Because there are billions of people, and if you want to interact with them, you must be able to have billions of different opinions coming and being able to accept them, or to tolerate them at least.
How did you find integrating yourself into a different political and societal system there in Istanbul? Was there a lot of work of understanding that you had to do, or you find it? How did you experience it?
I must say that it was an insanely big learning process for me that also brought up a lot of dilemmas in myself, being more or less suddenly the first time confronted with being in a privileged position, being a more or less straight white man from Europe. Learning then that actually exactly these characteristics that you are kind of the characteristics of all the evil in the world. And I don't know, I got really politicized here in Germany. I was not in touch with any political opinions or with any thoughts about this. We were always super careless, not making jokes about everything, having no idea about what the world is actually like, and that some things they are not, you shouldn't make jokes about. And there we come to the point of taking things serious also. Taking things serious. I think when we grew up in Germany, it was so playful and so safe that we didn't take anything serious. We didn't know about the real dangers and the real problems of this world at all. And when I moved away and moved to Turkey, my first girlfriend that I moved here for was a left-wing journalist who has started to work with 13, being on all the protests, always working on a left-wing newspaper. And she politicized me and educated me a lot, definitely. And more, I saw also things here. I experienced the economic crisis. I experienced certain political happenings and problems. I experienced the heaviness of this life and the problems that people are facing here every day. Noting that Turkey is still the tip of the iceberg if you go to other places, finding out that actually the only abnormal place is actually Europe, because this is the only place where people are more or less living in peace and have no struggles, in Western Europe, let's say, and thinking that this is the normality, while actually they are the abnormality, because I would say that probably 95% of the world is suffering under really substantial and basic life problems. And I think it's really important to also here find your standpoint. First of all, I hated myself. I had really big problems about like who I am. Why do I have this passport? Why do I have all these possibilities that others don't? How can I justify this? How can I ever go back? How can I live in Europe again, knowing now what is actually the life and the people experiencing outside? But I also had to make a peace with this, and I must say that I think everybody who would randomly be born with such a passport should be super aware of how much it is worth this passport, and that it's a really big privilege, should try to share this privilege and the possibilities as much as possible with the people who don't have it, and enjoy also life as much as possible because so many people can't.
But that's wow, that's a long list of, of different things that are also somewhat opposite to each other. Yeah, I do agree to a certain extent on, of course. Well, you said something before that your ex-girlfriend educated you politically. I'm not sure what you meant by that, but was that something that allowed you to then experience things in a different way? And do you believe that we need to be educated in order to do that?
I mean, with educated, I mean that she brought me close to the subject, that she talked a lot about it, that I was the first time asked some questions, and I asked questions, and I learned a lot during this period. And since I'm here, I learned a lot. Politics is something, for example, that is concerning everybody here in a completely direct way. There is not such a thing like you're not interested in politics. This is a privileged standpoint. You must be a millionaire who doesn't care about anything to do this. And even then, probably the millionaires here, they have also very big political concerns. So here, I found out that there is nothing which is not political. And this is, I think, a really important point. And I think people definitely, especially in Europe, where people have all the possibilities to educate themselves, to travel everywhere, to see, to learn. They should be way more aware of this, and they should be almost forced to do this, I think, because they are in control of so much that is concerning the rest of the world, and they're absolutely not aware of anything, basically. So this is a really big part, and I think, I don't know, sometimes I wished we should force all the people or make it mandatory to live at least 5 years in Yemen. Everybody from Germany should live in Yemen, and the people from Yemen should live in Germany to understand.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with this. I think I agree that we should be more aware, but also there is a point in which you put certain pressure on yourself as an individual. And you feel also your head with all these inputs from everywhere and globally and the other side of the world. And it does become really hard to do what you said as well, then enjoy life. I mean, I think it can also prevent a little bit this enjoying the present, going outside, looking at the flowers. Like I'm just
exactly, because
I don't know.
It sounds ridiculous knowing that people are dying everywhere while you look at the flowers.
Yeah, that it does, but also it is this one experience of life that each one of us has as well. And to what extent should we sort of throw it away and yes, suffer also for all of the different problems that if we start listing them right now, we will never end, basically. And at what point should we stop to think about them and try to instead feel better to then produce even better future, maybe be better for the next generation? So for me, this is really a point that I don't have a definite answer, but I think about it a lot. Is it better to, constantly remind ourselves of how things are going bad and how shitty we are at being humans and how many wars there are everywhere? Or is it better not to ignore it, but to focus on also the good things of life that actually can keep us going every day and allow us to transmit maybe something good to others as well? I don't know what you think about this.
I think the art here is exactly like with noise and silence, to find the balance. To find the balance between you and the environment while being aware of it. I think you shouldn't be ignorant and just not look at the news and don't travel to other countries and just ignore everything and look at the flowers all day. But you also shouldn't forget the beauty of life and die every day 1,000 deaths for all the suffocation in the world. This will also not help anybody. I think it's important to be aware of it, but being aware of the struggles that life brings and the terrible things that are happening in the world may also remind you of where you are standing and how rich you are and how happy you should be about what you have. Because I think people who cannot travel everywhere because of passport problems, they wish so much to be able to travel everywhere, maybe. And they would do it if they could. And I think you should also do it because you can. And you should learn as much as possible. And of course, you should be humble. You shouldn't judge. You shouldn't take too much from the others. You should be always.
Sounds like the description of the perfect human.
Exactly, of course. I mean, I'm just saying what we're aiming for. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. But you should also, you should be aware of what you have. And I think this is also part of humbleness and also a really big part of awareness to remind yourself all the time of in what amazing situation you are in, that nobody is trying to kill you at the moment and that you have money to buy some food and you have a safe bed somewhere. These basic things are not at all a normality in this world, and it's important to be thankful for this every day and make the best out of it without ignoring the rest around it, and of course always trying to contribute in a way to a better world.
Do you find yourself thinking about this, like reminding yourself of those things often?
Yeah, I really try to, and I'm trying to remind others of them as well sometimes.
How?
Yeah, I don't know, in just saying it sometimes. I don't know, my mother, this comes from my mother probably because she always broke down everything to a very universal point of view. And always when you came with a problem, of course you should solve the problem, you should think about the a specific problem. But at one point, some people are exaggerating this. And then it's important maybe to remember that actually you're alive, you're 27 years old, you have a few €100 to eat something, you have a house, you have friends, you have people that you love, you have things that you stand for. So this is always
Moms are
important
pretty
to
good
live.
for that, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
remind of the most important things.
I think it's also an old. I don't know. There are some people who are getting older and they get really wiser, and these people they always remind you they're so relaxed about everything. You come up with your young, dramatic ideas and problems and dilemmas that you're living in, and you're telling them, and they smile to you and they say like, yeah, it's all not that bad, like it will get easier. And yeah, but obviously it's not getting easier without work. I mean, but reminding yourself sometimes of where you stand and being content is maybe a good basis, because if you are desperate and suffering all the time for yourself and for the other people, then you also don't have enough energy, and this is not a good basis to even change something and make something better and bring some positive energy. So it's about like you cannot love somebody else if you don't love yourself. So first of all, be aware of the standpoint and the richness that you have. Be so happy about it and thankful about it. And from this point, try to improve the world and bring also some positive thoughts into the world, because constantly being depressed will not help anybody.
So would you say, going back to, for example, the production of music, so what kind of place does music that come from, let's say, a place of depression or sadness or these more negative feelings that gets then produced and released into the world, where does this stand in what you're saying?
Yeah, I think music is a very universal language. It's the most universal language to people who can hear. And I think it's really important to share and to listen to music that is sad and expressing some problematic and dark feelings. For me, these songs are mostly, anyways, the most beautiful songs. The music that I produce has always a certain melancholy, and I'm extremely triggered by melancholic music in a way.
Do you know why?
I think because it's healing in a way. Sharing this feeling, first of all, makes you feel less alone. Somebody made a song and you can feel sadness together, listening together the song, or just you alone at home and the person who made the song actually. And this makes you feel maybe being understood and not being alone. And at the same time, you transfer this destructive feeling into a product of beauty in a way. And this is for me also my art, and this is what I'm so happy about, is that, and I don't know how else I could do it. I think the biggest way of expressing myself and expressing the things that I experience all the time, processing them, reflecting them, and healing them in a way to get rid of them also, is producing art, and especially music. If I wouldn't have music, I have the feeling everything would be stuck inside of myself, and I would implode at one point. But like this, I can let things out, and even in very sad moments, actually, the most in the lowest points, the most authentic and beautiful pieces come to daylight, because they're so real, and you express something, and actually afterwards you feel lighter after expressing it, because you give it into a new bubble, into a new space, into a new product that suddenly becomes a thing by itself. It can inspire others, it can only inspire you, and even if you never listen to it again, it's okay. You just expressed it once. It's like going to the psychologist almost. It's like, you know what I mean? You leave it into this room, and then you can you have at least expressed it and reflected on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really beautiful, this idea of what you said, that it's almost healing when you're listening to a sad song by yourself at home, and you know that at least there is one more person that is experiencing that, is the person who made that song as well, and possibly other people who are listening in to it as well.
Would be interesting if you could also connect to a music that is written by an artificial intelligence. Then you wouldn't have the possibility to feel like somebody's out there. It would just create something randomly based on what it's
That's
given.
an interesting thought. Do you think it will still be healing, or
It depends how you think of it. It depends how you think of it. But definitely less. I mean, human-made things in music also, for example, since there's this electronic music, and you can work with a computer, and you can program things, and you can put things in a grid, and you can work them out like this, the music has become less connective to me, I have the feeling. Like, I used to play a lot with sequences, and of course something that is perfectly in a perfect rhythm, always exactly the same loop, is something also very beautiful, because it is so unnatural, because also the days which always happen every day, another day, but they always differ in length, and they always completely differ in content. So there is a rhythm, but the rhythm is never perfect. Exactly like the circles and the planets, they're also not circling in a perfect circle, more like in an oval shape. So there, I think, if something is human played, it's more unperfect, and therefore more natural, and it's easier to connect to it because it's imperfect.
okay, so what you're saying is that with electronic music, you're starting to feel less connected to it at some point, because you can make it somewhat perfect. You can really make the rhythm.
Yeah, it's not about electronic music. Electronic music is just the way that the music is coming to the speakers in the way. It's about I mean, of course, there's also, like, in the techno music, which is completely based on rastas, which are constantly repeating like a machine. There is also something very exciting about this. I always had like a very apocalyptic machine, Matrix, Blade Runner feeling listening to this kind of music, and this is very, very exciting as well. But for me, I'm connecting more to hand-played stuff, basically. Like, for example, if you sequence a melody that would always be in a perfect grid, it is different than if you play it with your hands, because or a drummer also would always, every hit that you would do would be a little bit different, a little bit off the grid, and this brings something very organic into it.
You play a lot of different instruments, right?
More or less, I try to.
You try to. I was actually going to talk a little bit about what you made in the last residency that we did together in Czech Republic, because I think it kind of fits in this, what we're talking about, this imperfection and this more spontaneous sounds, and creating rhythm together collectively in a group of people that don't even know necessarily how to play certain things, and singing together I mean, you even got me singing, which I'm kind of still surprised that I did that. But yeah, maybe you can tell us a little more about what the idea was behind the project.
Yeah, to be honest, I always made music alone. I have a few experiences where I made music with other people together, which were more or less satisfying. I had big problems making music with others because I was so much being sure about how it had to be and wasn't able to accept others' opinions and find a compromise or I think also here I get a bit older and a little bit more liberal, and a little bit my progress has become in a different approach. And then I came to Magic. I naturally set up this place there for all of us, and everything became supernatural. I just it's maybe also about Magic and the energy there. It's most certainly also connected to this and the dynamic in the group. But I felt so free and unpressured, and just opened this place and invited everybody to play there and record with a big belief that something that would come out will be of a certain beauty because of all the energy in Magic. And I try to capture some of this energy and of this beauty and of this feeling that we have all together. I must say I really enjoyed it. It was a really beautiful experience to make music, especially also with people who are not making music usually.
Maybe we should tell people who are listening, how did you arrange this, which I think is really relevant.
Yeah, in the yard of Nico's father, in the barn up there, we set up like with carpets, a place where you would sit on the floor. There's lots of space with like some small tables around, and filled them with instruments. Lucas, our friend, brought instruments, electric guitar, bass, and drums. I brought two synthesizers. We had another keyboard, and we had a microphone and some contact microphones, which I gave to people, and they started to experiment around with them. The contact mics, they take the vibration rather than a sound wave, and you clip them onto something and onto some material and touch the material and create sounds with this. And they were really nice things. Clara, for example, who is actually not has made music much probably in her life, she came, and her main topic, as you remember, were the elderberries that she collected.
Yeah. She was foraging elderberries everywhere.
Exactly. And these elderberries she brought and put the microphone on a pot and let them rain into the pot, kind of. And I have recordings of this. This was really interesting. Gabi came with a pack of cereals that she suddenly was aware of the sound of it and wanted to record it. I think I gave maybe some people a little bit the possibility of recording something, showing them that we can actually record everything and make music out of everything. And people got a bit inspired and came around with ideas, and we adapted all of these ideas as much as possible into music that really improvisedly happened in the moment, which didn't have any professional approach, which didn't have any pressure or certain idea about a genre. It was just really pure music that suddenly happened in a combination of people from time to time. And this I tried to catch and record everything.
Yeah. And also connecting to what we were talking about before, in this a bit unperfect rhythm, or not so planned and not so polished, I think. I mean, from what I listened to, it sounds already pretty beautiful. I know you're putting together this into an album, so I'm very looking forward to hear what is the final stage of it. Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of really going through this topic of humility and being humble from a lot of different directions. I feel that everything that we spoke to until now somewhat touches on it, maybe not so directly, but yeah, it's great. Is there anything you would really like to add on this topic?
Yeah, I think humility and humbleness is definitely lacking in the world. I don't know if this is true
That's a
for
statement.
everybody. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to practice it way better. I have the feeling. I wish to become more humble, and I wish others to be more humble as well.
That's a question. That's a question that I have for you. How does taking yourself seriously go hand in hand with making yourself more humble? Because it's almost like, the moment you say, now I'm doing this seriously, as in I want to get better at it, I want to get, I don't know, I kind of just want to push it. Yeah, you're also more likely to become less humble about things.
I think actually it's not contradictive, because not taking yourself serious at all would be also not humble. This would be just foolish. Because if you have to do something in your life, if you don't take anything serious and also not your own work, then you end up like doing nothing. Then you can also just like lay around for the rest of your life. Maybe you stop taking your own health serious anymore, and then you would probably die. So it's super important to take things serious. And I think also humbleness is not required everywhere. Humbleness is not required in music. Humble music is not necessarily something good. It feels like
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
Yeah, humble music would sound like, of course, I mean, maybe the way that you present your music can be a bit humble. I mean, you don't have to go out and like Kanye West and just become God in front of everybody. You should just let the product speak for itself, maybe. And then people can find something. But obviously, you should also not hide it. If you want to be listened, then you should take any opportunity to show your
Yeah,
music.
that's what I mean, really. Does music then acquire a higher level if it is listened by more people?
Not at all. I think actually it loses quality if more people listen to it, in a way. I don't know why.
But you as a musician, you're still striving to get more people to listen to your pieces.
Of course. I mean, I would love that many people listen to my music, but I also don't try to make music for everybody. I think I also belong somewhere to a certain group of people who are having a certain understanding of music that I'm connected to. And of course, especially these people, I would like to listen to my music. Because I have the feeling they would understand it well, and it's also inspired by them in a way. But of course, my music is not like limited to listeners. I mean, I had people listening to my DJ sets who really didn't look like they usually listen to this kind of music, and they enjoyed it as well. And this is also actually an even better compliment if somebody from completely outside also understands that than if some fellow musician would give you an appreciation for what you're doing. Because it means that you can touch also to other worlds which are completely unrelated. And that also these worlds can relate to you. And this gives actually the feeling of peace that even people who are absolutely different from completely different backgrounds and understandings and worldviews can both understand the same thing or the beauty about something in a way.
Yeah, I think we really already spoke about a lot of different really interesting things. And of course, now there is the usual thing that we do where you can leave a topic for the guest who comes after you. We call it a ruin of a conversation. So something that is inspired in our conversation of now, but not necessarily also could be something that you're just curious to hear other people talking about.
Yeah, humility was obviously a really good subject. Yeah, I would really love to hear also people about how they perceive the world, about this, what we talked about, the balance and these opposites that are contradictive in a way, and finding your place in between all the different options of standpoints, and seeing things. Yeah, no, I'm thinking too big. Actually, the entire podcast series is obviously about this.
Let's make an entire podcast on the contradiction of existence.
Exactly. Self-location, locating yourself. But this is exactly what the podcast is about. I mean, locating ourselves and finding different points of view on how we are locating ourselves in this world. So this
Yes,
is too wide.
you precisely got the point of the podcast. I'm super happy.
This is nice. Yeah, maybe then let's talk about balance.
Balance. Yeah, that's a nice open word that can be interpreted in many different ways. I like it.
Yeah, Because often you have the feeling balance is needed, but if everything is in perfect balance, things would be also terribly boring, I have the feeling. So I imagine it like a whip, like a swing or something like this. It's like in balance like this, but the excitement comes that it's always shaking a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I find it interesting that we started by talking about humility and being humble, and then this topic of balance comes into mind because, as you have been describing, how do you keep, yeah, okay, you want to be humble, but then there is this necessity of the balance of also sometimes pushing things and not pushing people around, but pushing things further or maybe pushing yourself further. And I don't think that this is excluded from being humble, because if you're humble to yourself, then you're also able to push yourself more. This is also what we have discussed. So maybe it kind of this humbleness and this humility has to do like a full circle to become to become something good. It has to go through the balance, but yeah, kind of in a round.
Yeah, I think it's also important, or a big part of life of the humans is that we set some certain values like humility or balance, and these values are unreachable in the end, actually. They're very romantic and unrealistic, but this is so beautiful to set these really high goals, and probably life of humans is then just about trying to go as close as possible to the goal, and in this way learning. Because if you would reach the goal already, what would you do then? Then you would have nothing to do anymore. So life is exactly about like growing and developing something towards this, maybe. So the lack of it is necessary, so you go for it. If it was there already, you wouldn't work for anything anymore. You know what I mean?
So if we were all born humble already, then we wouldn't have, we wouldn't allow ourselves to sort of live through the experience of life and try to make ourselves humble, like more humble, for example.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, and also question what means humbleness, and is it actually what is required everywhere? Yeah, actually, it's funny. It's exactly with noise and silence, this problem, exactly that a void and a fullness need each other to exist, because everything that exists is actually only in between. There's never a whole void or a whole fullness or a whole silence or a whole noise. It's always the balance. So you need the lack of something to create something.
Wow, that's a nice sentence, I think, to end it with. Yeah, thank you so much for this. I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of things to think about. I will include all of the links of different albums that we have discussed and your work in the description of the podcast, because I think people should really take a listen. And hopefully we'll get to see the documentary out, or I don't know, somewhere at some point.
At some point, for sure, yes. We are just working on how to publish it in the right way.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Giulia. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you want to dive deeper into the show, don't forget to check the podcast description for extra resources, contact information, and a sign-up form for our newsletter. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, take care.